Donald Trump is the most Christian president in American history. Work with me here, because both times that he was elected, evangelical Christians were one of his most influential and supportive voting blocs. And he hasn't been shy about courting Christians.
God spared my life for a reason.
To a large extent, he's delivered on the promises that he made to his evangelical base. He helped end Roe. He let religious organizations avoid the Affordable Care Act's contraception requirements. And of course, he's systematically wiping out any mention of trans folks, a favorite cudgel of many evangelicals. And to top it off, he signed an executive order declaring an end to anti-Christian bias. Because of course, when you think of the most persecuted religious group in the US, evangelical Christians really leap to mind. Now, Trump and Christianity have always seemed like an odd partnership.
An Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal.
Jesus constantly talked about loving your enemies, supporting the least of these, living in a way filled with love.
Sell all your belongings and give the money to the poor.
Mr. Trump, well, his hobby of extramarital affairs and shady business deals doesn't exactly scream Christian values.
Is she your wife? You know what? I would say she's a beautiful woman, but if I did say that, my political career, you're not allowed to say that.
You know, the very mention of things like love and mercy seemed to make him squirm.
They may not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals.
So how has he become a hero, even a leader for American Christians? Well, there's two people who can help us explain the rise of Trump and Christianity. One is Friedrich Nietzsche. The other is Paula White.
The longer the dance, the more bees she gets aroused. So Queen Bee starts going into this frenzy.
If you haven't heard of her, just wait. She's more fun than a barrel of monkeys. Okay, let's start by clarifying which brand of Christians have anointed Trump as the second coming. Now, some of his most vocal supporters have been Christian nationalists, and specifically white Christian nationalists. And it's easy to listen to the news and feel like these white Christian nationalists are some shadowy, conspiratorial society threatening our democracy's very existence. Well, you wouldn't be totally wrong to think that, but Christian nationalism itself is a sort of debatable moniker. Researchers tend to disagree about what Christian nationalism even is, or the degree to which it functions as a coherent ideology. In fact, a report published by the Pew Research Foundation in January wrote that there is no universally accepted definition of religious nationalism, which makes it hard to have a clear definition of what makes someone a Christian nationalist. But they elaborate that in order to be defined as a Christian nationalist, you would have to agree with 4 principles. The first is that being a Christian is very important to being truly American. And it is very important that the US president share their beliefs, and the Bible should have at least some influence over US laws, and when the Bible conflicts with the will of the people, the Bible should have more influence. Pew found that by these measures, just 6% of US adults consider themselves Christian nationalists. And we can take this in 2 ways, right? Either, so maybe there aren't actually many Christian nationalists, or might be a lot of folks practicing a type of faith that's in line with nationalism, even if they're not consciously aware of it.
We take our authority over this election. Jesus is Lord.
And while there's a lot to unpack in that list, nothing here is all that different than what the old moral majority or Christian right has stood for decades, back when Billy Graham was praying on the White House lawn. Now, evangelical Christians have preferred candidates that reflect biblical values, like an emphasis on family values, opposition to abortion and gay rights, and support for prayer in schools. So if Christians say the Bible is so important to them, then why did they help elect a guy who's more interested in it as a prop rather than as a sacred text?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
In the 1960s, sociologist Robert Bellah argued that much of the way Americans talk about their country echoes the way Christians talk about their faith, and he deems this worldview a civil religion. Now, America doesn't have an official religion technically, but civil religion is infused with vibes and rituals of Christianity. So in this civil religion, we get sacred text like the Declaration of Independence, sacred symbols like the American flag, and of course we get sacred leaders like Abraham Lincoln and the Founding Fathers. But there's also a conception of America as the promised land, the establishment of a new social order that shall be a light unto all nations.
God spared my life for a reason, and that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness.
Now, Bellah describes the civil religion as a genuine vehicle of national religious self-understanding. And indeed, our political language is infused with this American exceptionalism that relies on God favoring the American people and the ostensible American way of life. To the degree civil religion has a God, it's less concerned with the Sermon on the Mount and more concerned with the U.S. being a city on a hill, a shining beacon of prosperity and freedom. Now, in the decades since Bellah's article, and as Christian leaders have sought more influence in politics, you could argue that civil religion has become more more religious, while Christianity has become more civil or political. In the 2000s, when the culture started shifting to the left, we saw expanded rights granted to the LGBTQ community, women's health care, and minorities. Christian leaders began to describe this as an affront to God and a symptom of America in decline. So when Trump uses rhetoric about anti-Christian bias, and Christians claim that their religious freedom is under attack, well, it's likely not their faith, but the civil expression of that faith that they see as under attack. But you know who saw all of this coming? Your friend and mine, Friedrich Nietzsche, who compares Christianity to a slave morality defined by its resentment, which is a type of resentment. In The Genealogy of Morals, Nietzsche describes a noble morality and a slave morality. And he says the slave morality is based on the idea of no. He calls no the creative deed and goes on to say, in order to exist, slave morality always first needs a hostile external world. It needs, physiologically speaking, external stimuli in order to act at all. Its action is fundamentally reaction. Now, by asserting its own victimization, Christianity establishes the grounds of its existence, which breeds a kind of anger and resentment, and then wields that anger as a tool for power. And when you're a religion or a political party identified by what you're against, it becomes really hard to shed that vibe when you actually win. And we can see this in how the current Republican Party behaves. Like, they're the party in power, and you get scenes like this one.
Can't trust the government anymore.
Having access to personal data.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You are the government.
And of course, there's the reactions to Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl performance, which spun conservatives into a rage because they might have power, but they're still not very cool. Political rhetoric in the US has always had echoes of civil religion, but this turn towards resentment has been brewing since the civil rights movement. Now, Christian leaders like Jerry Falwell spoke out against the Civil Rights Act of 1964, claiming that it was a violation of human and private property rights. In the mid-2000s, the idea that gay marriage could become legalized or that a healthcare law may contain a mandate to cover contraceptives all became fodder for Christians to claim that their religious freedom was under threat. Because if I'm an evangelical Christian and someone uses birth control 100 miles away, my soul dies. This psychology is all exemplified in things like the God's Not Dead series of movies. If you're a sicko like me and you want to know more about them, we've made videos on all of those movies. You can check them out. But this all adds up to the idea that the real threat to humanity isn't climate change or, I don't know, nuclear apocalypse. It's the liberals. But how does this all explain Trump's unlikely rise to figurehead of this civil religion? Before we get into it, I need to tell you about something. Spam. Now, spam has taken over all of our lives. You know, all those constant calls about your car's extended warranty and emails claiming that you want a gift card and it floods your inbox every single day. If you've ever wondered how spammers get your info, I know I have. It's because they probably bought it. Because there's a whole market out there that many of us aren't aware of where our personal information gets bought and sold. They know your name, your age, where you live, your phone number, your email address, what you buy online, even your browsing history. You have the right to demand that your name and information be taken off these lists, but the process can be pretty complicated and time consuming, which brings me to the sponsor of today's video, Incogni. Now, Incogni is a service that helps you fight back against data brokers and remove your information from their databases. And here's how it works, right? So you give Incogni permission to act on your behalf, and they go find those lists that you're on and demand you be taken off. I've started using Incogni a while back, and oh boy, am I already seeing the positive effects. They've already contacted hundreds of data brokers on my behalf, and over the past few weeks, I've received considerably less spam emails, text, and calls. I also get to track the progress Incogni is making for me on their dashboard, so I can see how many requests they've sent out, how many have been successful, and how many that they're still working on. Now, if you want to check it out for yourself, click the link in the description, and when you do, you're going to get 60% off their annual plan, which I really recommend, because having Incogni to keep an eye out for you throughout the year is going to ensure that your data stays off the market as they carry out repeated removals to take it down if it shows up again. So click the link in the description and get 60% off the annual subscription to keep your data secure. Now, let's get back to the show. Well, journalist Sarah Posner argues that this resentment and erosion over America's decline as a moral leader hit its apex during Barack Obama's tenure as president. She writes that, primed by conspiracy theories about Obama's place of birth, his race, and his religion, from the outset, many in the movement were ready to believe that he was poised to eviscerate their freedom and crush Christianity. Every move as president, real and imagined, was fodder for these superstitions. Now, the most potent of these conspiracy theories, that Obama was not really American, was fittingly championed by Trump. In him, the Christian right found a figure who forcefully voiced the same resentment as they did. You know, it doesn't hurt that Trump is famously resentful of anyone who doesn't agree with his views or that criticizes him publicly. His main driving force seems to be undermining or destroying anyone who personally offends him or opposes his policies or implicates him in crimes. So Christian leaders sort of found a kindred and kindredly resentful spirit in Trump. You know, when Trump talked about America in decline, Christian leaders agreed. And when Trump famously said this in his convention,
I alone can fix it.
he tapped into the Christian desire for a savior who can deliver the chosen people from their suffering. What's more, Trump becomes not just a symbol for the Christian right, but he embraces their embrace of him. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't just accept it, he loves it. But there's also another thing that's going on here, and it's a shift within Christianity itself to embrace a thing called the prosperity gospel. Now, what started out as a fringe movement has gone fully mainstream, with some studies pegging the number of Protestants who believe in this form of Christianity as high as 50%. It's even found its way into pop culture with books like The Secret. This is the belief that God wants you, yes you, to be wealthy, prosperous, and healthy. But theologically, it holds the notion that revelation supersedes things like facts and reason, and that one's authority is imbued with things like the supernatural powers to heal and even lift people out of poverty. So it's like cool if people get out of poverty if magic does it, but not if policy does it. I get it. This is why televangelists present themselves as anointed leaders who are modern day prophets and apostles. And you know who loves this whole vibe? Donald Trump. Now, Posner describes how during his first campaign, Trump struck up a friendship with the televangelist and prosperity gospel preacher, Paula White. Trump found her messages of success to be appealing, and in Trump, Paula White saw the fulfillment of everything the prosperity gospel preaches.
And every demonic altar that has been erected against him will be torn down.
So in Trump, we get this weird, powerful amalgamation of different narratives of Christianity that carry echoes of civil religion, resentment, racism, and now the prosperity gospel. You know, who would have thought it would all come together like this? You know what? Trump friggin' loves it. In his embrace of Christianity and the prosperity gospel, he's become a secular version of everything the prosperity gospel believes. You know, he's rich, he demands absolute loyalty, and he promises that he alone can save us. He might have only recently proclaimed himself a king, but he's been giving off godlike vibes for a while. Posner writes that his pronouncements are not to be questioned, and his followers believe he will, supernaturally or otherwise, make America great again. They believe Trump will achieve MAGA because God has anointed him to carry out this mission. He may not actually be a Christian, but God has chosen him to protect Christians and therefore America. When Christians are fed a message of constant suppression of free expression of religion, and then that gets combined with a figure who preys on the psychological persecution of those Christians, well, you get strange but oddly suitable bedfellows. That's all for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please do leave a comment. Let us know what you think. Subscribe if you haven't already. Huge shout out to our patrons. There's a link in the description if you feel like joining. And in the meantime, walk in peace, my children.